Notre troisième et dernier conférencier nous provient de Waterloo. Donc, il s'agit de Darshpreet Bhatti, qui va nous présenter une vue d'ensemble de la planification du financement, de la construction de la planification du financement et de la construction du projet ION à Waterloo. Darshpreet est diplômé de l'Université de Toronto et possède une expérience diversifiée en ingénierie des transports et en planification dans les secteurs publics et privés. Il a travaillé dans une multitude de projets de transport et occupé plusieurs rôles différents. Ses projets antérieurs comprennent notamment le projet de tramway sur la St. Clair Avenue de la Toronto Transit Commission, le projet de corridor nord-sud du train léger sur rail à Ottawa et le projet de revitalisation du secteur riverain de Toronto, puis également aussi les projets là, autoroutiers. Peut-être juste une petite note, en fait, j'espère que c'était clair pour tout le monde, on ne l'a pas mentionné, mais quand on parle de BRT, c'est le service rapide par bus, c'est la même chose qu'un SRB, puis le LRT, c'est un tramway, un SLR en français, donc un service léger sur rail. Donc, juste une petite précision après ça, je me suis rendu compte que ça n'avait pas été nommé. Donc, Darshpreet, c'était toi.
Thank you, Etienne, and thank you to the audience for giving us the opportunity to present our projects and share our experiences. As Etienne mentioned, my name is Darshpreet Bhatti. I've been fortunate enough to work on this project for 8 years, so I've seen and I've led the planning of it, procurement of it, and now the construction. So there's a lot to learn that potentially public agencies don't anticipate from these projects, but they have a big impact, in both in a positive and a negative way. So the project is called ION. ION is a Greek word, moving forward. So we chose it for many reasons, but the fundamental essence was that it's a positive step moving forward, and we want to bring something to the region that we don't have today. The history of the ION is pretty interesting. Given that I've spent 8 years on it, 20 minutes won't do me justice explaining, but I'll try to identify some unique highlights of the project. So it starts back in 1976. Our council in 1976 had the foresight to recognize that a lot of people will be coming to the region, and we have to have the right tools to be able to manage that growth. So what you see on the screen is our urban area, which is in the purple. The dark purple line around is our urban area. As you can see, it's pretty dense already. And the orange band in the middle is what the council in 1976 designated as a central transit corridor. They called it central because it connects the 3 urban zones in the region. You have Waterloo City on the north, you have Kitchener City in the middle, and you have Cambridge City at the bottom. These are one of the fastest growing urban nodes in Toronto. Region of Waterloo is about 100 kilometers west of Toronto, so we're just outside the umbrella of an agency called Metrolinx, which you may have heard, that's doing a lot of bigger projects in Toronto. So that's the inception of the project. 1976, they recognized we needed something for the future, and they designated this area. What's unique is it allowed a lot of planning policies to be in the place. So a lot of projects that are happening today don't necessarily have the planning policies to support it. You know, we're introducing a new BRT, LRT, and then we work on planning. We were lucky enough that we had decades of planning policies dictating a lot of development to be along this corridor. The objective was twofold. One was shaping urban form. What do we mean? All that means is we wanted to have control over where development is and what type of development comes to the region. And the other objective was, if we're going to put all the development along this orange band, we have to make sure that we give them good transportation choices. There should be good roads, there should be good transit, there should be good active transportation. There were other benefits. I won't go through each one of them, but 2 key highlights that are unique to the region are we have some of the most fertile agricultural lands that are just outside the urban boundaries. We wanted to protect them. And the region is the only, I think, in Ontario, mid-sized region that still relies on groundwater for drinking water. We don't rely on lakes. We have very good groundwater reserves, and we wanted to protect those. And the best way to protect is to curtail urban sprawl. So in a way, the region is not looking for revitalization, is not looking for something to revamp the region. We're actually proactively building a system which will serve the future. What are we building? We're building a system in 2 steps. We're building a light rail section of the system, and we're building a BRT section of the system. I'll walk through it. The blue line represents the light rail component. It's about 19 kilometers with 16 stops. Unlike any other project, ours is not a commuter rail system. We're not bringing people from the outside to the downtown core. Each one of these stop locations are true activity nodes. They're true destinations and origins today. People want to be there. People have reason to be there for jobs or for residence purposes. So we're not moving people from top to bottom or from top to the middle. We're moving people to each one of these station stops. The other component is the bus rapid. So the red line depicts our bus rapid transit system. It uses a good portion on highways, and then a good portion is on urban streets taking to downtown Cambridge. The dotted line is our future of converting that BRT into light rail. We have initiated that planning process just like Ottawa. I'm in the midst of it, and hopefully by early next year, we'll have a plan approved by Ministry of Environment, and then next steps towards funding. There are many other initiatives that are happening just outside ION. It's not just about building one light rail line in the middle of the region and that's it. We're actually spending money on many other initiatives. One of them is community building strategy. So the idea is you walk through each parcel along the entire alignment and look at what is the future potential of that parcel. It may have a building on it, may have an institution on it, may have some land use, but what is the future use of that? And we have actually done a business case for each one of those parcels. The idea is to give that business case to the cities. The region is a two-tier municipality, so the region is responsible for higher order transit, and the cities that implement the station area planning and other land uses. So they're taking this business case and are looking at that for each stop within 800 meters, what are the best land uses? What is the business case? What can we sell to the development community out there and say, this is supportable, be ready to build that for us. Another key component of this is a hub. I'll get into it in detail, but it's a central node along the spine where it connects us to Toronto and many other areas. And I'll give you more details on that. And the last is roads. Roads are still important. We're spending close to $1 billion in the next few years on roads. Our objective is, any transit program, you cannot just change the mindset of people and say, okay, don't drive, just come to transit. We recognize that. We're doing about 5% region-wide on transit use, and our goal is that with the implementation of ION and many other transit initiatives, we can bring about 15% of the population to start using transit. The reason we have to do that, we don't have the real estate. We're introducing a project because we know that in the future we will not be able to widen our roads, extend our roads. We have to serve the people where they are today, and unfortunately there's no more room to provide more roads. So transit is no longer an option for us. We have to take that into account for our future planning. So the black line you see is our ION project. The red lines are our express crosstown corridors. So as my colleagues from Ottawa and Calgary were mentioning, we used to be a radial system. A lot of our buses used to come from outside into a central transit station, but we are changing that, and we are not doing that now. We actually did the planning before we even started the implementation of ION. We worked with our University of Waterloo folks to look at what's the best way of changing transit in its entirety. Look at the level that's serving the neighborhoods, look at the service that's serving major corridors, look at where ION is and where do we want to be in the future. So the orange lines that you see are supposed to be crosstown corridors that will eventually become either BRT lines or LRT lines depending on the growth that we see along them. We also have parallel routes to our spine. So, you can't just have one north-south line, which is ION. You got to have other parallel routes which are serving other neighborhoods that are too far away from the spine. So we have built the system such that you can get on anywhere on the system, whether on a bus or light rail, and travel anywhere else without having to worry about the different modes that you're jumping between. The next step we did while we were looking at the planning was also to look at active transportation. So the green lines that you see are origins and destinations. These are trends and patterns where people want to walk and ride their bikes. So it's critical because when we're designing stations, when we're designing bus routes, we have to make sure that we connect to those origins and destinations. The BRT component was already launched in September of last year. We basically did the design in-house, and we launched that last year. It's doing quite well, even with the fact that the light rail component isn't done, which is supposed to connect to BRT. So, I'll get into why we did the split. I should have explained that previously, but the BRT component is similar to what Calgary is doing. We're looking at bus priority, at signals. We're looking at queue jumps. Basically, if a bus is approaching a signal, there's a lot of cars that are queued up. You want to make sure that the bus has the ability to bypass that and go ahead of that traffic queue. We also, as I mentioned, have sections of the bus rapid transit that are on a highway. So in Ontario, there's a new initiative these days where we're providing bus bypass shoulder lanes. These are wide shoulders on a highway that if there's a queue, if the traffic is moving below 40 kilometers, the bus has the ability to use this wide shoulder and bypass the traffic. There's a perception tied to it too. If I'm stuck in traffic and I see a bus going by, you know, my preference would be next time or the third time to say, you know what, maybe I should take the bus to get to my destination. The vehicles we're getting are Bombardier vehicles. So that's the vehicle that we will be purchasing from Bombardier. It's a light rail vehicle that can handle about 200 people in crushed load capacity. But initially, we would be running them as single-car trains. So unlike Calgary, which is about to go to 4-car trains, and Ottawa, that's intending to start with 2, I believe, we would be starting with 1. We're not big enough yet to warrant multiple-car trains. And we expect that for us to jump to 2-car trains at least 10, 15 years from now. The light rail component is being delivered as a first in Ontario as a design, build, finance, operate, maintain, just slightly different from Ottawa. They took the O out and we kept that in. The O is for operations. We don't run an operation today for light rail, so it made sense for us to make sure that the operations of a new system, which we're new to, are also managed by the same consortium, because the last thing that you want is the operator telling the maintainer that it's your fault and the maintainer pointing his finger back at the operator. You want to make sure that it's a seamless, integrated system. We have awarded it to a company, a consortium called GrandLink. They are comprised of 5 key members: Plenary, Meridian, Aecon, Kiewit, and Keolis. I know Aecon does a lot of work in Quebec. Kiewit is primarily an American firm, but they have done many P3s, public-private partnership programs. So the Denver Eagle project is there, and that's the only one that I know of at this point that's underway. Keolis is, it's a French company. Part of it's also owned by, I believe, the Quebec government. They have about 14, 16 systems around the world. This would be their first venture into light rail transit systems in Canada. You know, the last one that they have just launched is in Gold Coast in Australia. The way the contract is structured for light rail, basically we're responsible for fares, so there's no revenue risk on the consortium. That's all the regional risk. We structure the schedule, when the train should run and how fast and how often. We do the enforcement for safety and fare enforcement. Our system, the way it will be structured, it's one fare, and it will be proof of payment. So on all our buses and all of LRT vehicles, you won't have to pay on the vehicle itself. You'll either pay on the stop or you'll buy it online, and you'll have to have that proof of payment system with you. So, you know, we will randomly do enforcement. These bylaw officers will come by. They may ask you, do you have your transfer, ma'am or sir? And then they'll take that transfer, put it in a unit in their hand. If it says expired, then you're in trouble. And we have a graduated program where, you know, it may be a slap on the hand initially to a fine to being blacklisted from the system. But the objective was really that we don't want to have different fares for different technologies. You want to make it easy for people to use transit. So if I pay once, I only pay once. I take the bus transfer, I get onto the light rail, I don't have to pay again. From light rail, if I get off and take bus again, I don't have to change anything. It's just a continuous, seamless transfer. GrandLink, on the other hand, will design it, build it, operate it, and maintain it for 30 years. So it's a pretty long contract. And to make sure that we hold them responsible for it, like Ottawa, we have the finance component in there. It's not to pay for the project. It's really a hammer, a lever, to ensure that the contractor does not walk away in the middle of the contract. Now, they've given you a lot of money up front. You're going to pay that back slowly and slowly, and that's their incentive to remain in the project and remain and provide good performance on the project. Our project is roughly $818 million in construction cost, and it's another $1 billion in O&M cost. So in all projects, until we had awarded the contract, usually it was always the capital cost that was discussed. But for us, money was very important. We didn't have a lot of money. We were only given, unlike Ottawa and other cities, we were only given a very small funds, which we were thankful for, but we had only $818 million for construction costs. So we actually looked at how much can the taxpayer pay for the next 30 years to support that project. We had to estimate what the costs would be. and we created a cash flow which we gave to the bidding community and said, this is all we can pay. Can you deliver a project within that cash flow? And that's how our project is structured. And to help the bidding communities in financing, we looked at multiple ways of how we can take money from them and give them money back so that they can justify it from their end. Right now, the project is being supported by a 1.2% tax rate increase to the public in the area. It's not for townships, it's only to the 3 main cities, so Kitchener, Waterloo, and Cambridge pay, and the townships that are in the agriculture area do not pay towards the project, but they do benefit from it, but that's a decision that we made at our council. This is just showing how the ION light rail component infrastructure would be. You know, we have ballasted sections, which are tracks that are on ballast. These are primarily on rail corridors and hydro corridors where there's very less interaction with the public. And sections that are running on the road would be embedded in concrete like that. So it's a flush service. So that it's much easier for anyone who's crossing the road to traverse that lane. The system will be run with about 8-minute service. So you have a train coming every 4 minutes in either direction, which is pretty reliable. The stops are, we've been pretty frugal because we didn't have millions of dollars to spend on architecture on our stations, so we made them more practical and more modular. You want to make sure that rather than having curved canopies, which are specifically made by only few suppliers and are very custom, you go with something that's more angular, that's more rectangular. The anchor walls, the colored walls that you see, is our approach of providing some sort of public art to the area. So these colors, these patterns represent something unique to that area. These are just some other examples of how the stations will look. Just quickly on construction, it's 5 key steps. The first important one is buying land and clearing the area. Our objective was always to keep the system within the tight corridors we have rather than buying buildings out and destroying the businesses that we're trying to serve. Next is utilities, which will be the most impactful to any project. So even if you guys choose to go with a BRT project, that's the one that will impact you most because you have to dig down deep and remove these utilities, whether it's LRT or BRT, because you don't want interference in the long run when you're providing a service on that on that lane. The next step is easy, which is trackway, or in your case, it would be BRT, so it'd be just asphalt. And then you would be building your stops, and in our case, the next step would be electrifying it because the vehicles have to be powered in our case, and these are electrical wires that run on the top. And the last one is commissioning the system. Quickly, this is just showing how construction is when you're going through it. As you can see, the streets that they're on are pretty much, there's no ability to allow any traffic to be there. So communication and staging construction is very critical to these projects. In our case, we have done our best to do a 60-day notice, a 14-day notice, a 7-day notice, so that the public knows, the businesses knows that we're coming and that there will be an impact. And we have also worked with them to ensure that we can promote their business during that impactful period. This is quickly on the hub. This is 2 city blocks that we have purchased to allow for us to connect with inter-city, inter-regional rail. So we would be on the street level. The inter-regional or inter-city rail would be at the higher level up here. And basically, we're allowing the bidding community to look at what can they provide. Our objective is to have higher densities like these, as long as the transportation connections are provided on the first 2 floors. We're leaving it open to the bidding community to decide whether it's an office, residential, a hotel. This is just more examples of construction happening. This, interestingly, while we were digging up the roads, we came across corduroy roads. I'm not sure if you guys are familiar, but in the old days, when we had horses and buggies, they used to take logs of wood and they would put them along these muddy roads so that there would be some sort of a hard surface for the buggies to go on. And that's how they look like. So these are archaeological finds. So when you come across these, you have to stop the project, follow the environmental process to see, are we going to preserve these or eliminate them? Finally, construction challenges for businesses. The biggest thing is information. They want to be informed ahead of time. They want to make sure they have a way of advertising themselves to the bigger audience, that they're still open. They want to make sure that their day-to-day needs are met, which are, have access. People can walk up to them. People can drive up to them. They can have their deliveries meet the schedules that they have. Garbage gets picked up. These things happen on a day-to-day basis. Things get dropped. And you have to have the right team that's meeting with the businesses on a regular basis. So this is not a monthly meeting. This is us meeting with them almost on a daily basis saying, okay, are there any issues? What can we do to help? And then you have to convey that to the contractors that are out there to ensuring that there's a seamless transition of communication between the different parties. With that, that's my presentation. Like I said, there's much more to share, but in 20 minutes, that's the best I can do. Thank you.
Donc, on va y aller avec la période de questions. Oui, à l'avant.
Okay. So the funding is different. How you come up with a pool of money before you pay the consortium are two separate steps. So in our case, I didn't go into details, but we were being funded on this project by the province, the federal government, and our share was coming from the public taxes. So on the 818 million, there was almost a one-third, one-third, one-third. And our one-third for that 818 plus the $1 billion for 30 years is about 1.2% tax rate increase. So we're paying the full long-term O&M. The funding for the capital is the only piece that was shared between us and three levels of government. Once we have that money, so for us, we had to debenture our share and the long-term $1 billion, which is not debentured all at one time. It's debentured over time because we have other streams of revenue that are also coming in that we take into account. Once we have that money, the consortium is paid in our project on a monthly basis. So they had to spend so in Ottawa it was $300 million that they held upfront. In our case, it was $131 million that we held upfront. They had to spend the initial $131 million before we would start paying them. And our payments are not paid on a lump sum matter, although it's a fixed fee, fixed price contract. We pay them on a monthly basis. So we watch how much they have progressed. We agree that you have built so many linear kilometers of a pipe, so much road, so much system. This is the price for it, and then we would pay that amount. This allowed them to have more money coming in on a monthly basis and allowed them to reduce their bid. Typically on a P3, at least in Ontario, the contractor is given the go-ahead. They do the full project 2 years, 3 years, and then they get one big check at the end. They don't get any money in between. Or if they do, there's some milestones in between that they get paid for. For us to reduce the cost of the project, we wanted to make sure that the contractor is not borrowing a lot of money. So we would pay them more often. So we did it on a monthly basis, which actually helps us because now their progress is monitored on a monthly basis. They cannot lie that I was done up to this point. I'm watching them every month and I'm paying them for it and they're agreeing to it. So their progress is now documented on a monthly basis, which helps us too in the long run. They're making their money because now the way P3s are structured, the monies are given to these contractors to do the job. And then for borrowing that money, they have to get a rate of return. So on most government projects, the rate of return is pretty high. So on our project, for 30 years of investment, it's 13%. So there's no mutual fund, there's no insurance, there's no bond out there that gives you 13%. But on this deal and all the other P3 deals, the rate of return is very high for a very long time. That's why lenders, which are typically banks, are more than willing to give money towards these projects up front, so that they're built because they're going to get that rate of return. Yes, we're paying that premium through our taxes, but it's a known premium. It's not something that's unknown. We took account of that premium for the 30 years and then identified the tax rate now that would allow us to collect for that within a short time frame. So it's a known, it's not an unknown.
Maintenance, and financing. So how was it easy for people to accept that? How long did it take, and what was
it wasn't easy. I started on the project in 2006, and the project was approved in 2012. So it took us 6 years to get there. But what the public accepted and supported was that rapid transit is needed. We did have a divide on many thinking that it should be BRT, and we had a divide on many who thought it would be LRT. So we went through a whole process of showing the benefits of the two, and fundamentally it came down to this. BRT is cheap, no doubt. But we're trying to take a system through very narrow corridors, and it was very clear through technical design and analysis that in 20 years we would have the issue that Ottawa had. So if we spend $600 million on a bus system, and in 20 years now we have to look at a light rail system which would cost now billions, why would we make that decision? Right now, we have to make the best use of dollars that public has given us, and we know light rail won't be limited to 20 years. Light rail, with its capacity, can last us over a century. So fundamentally came down to this, that the benefit from light rail far outweighs the benefit of the savings from BRT. And I'll give you a very good example. People talk about if you bring something like light rail, you have very high land value uplift. That means property values go up. That is true. A lot of investment comes in. That hub picture that I showed you is a concept, but in that corner alone, just in 2 years, we're still in construction, we have had over $360 million of committed money. This is not projected. People have actually started construction. So there are a number of locations like those along the entire alignment. In the last 4 years, we have $1 billion of investment just along light rail. And if I'm an investor, I want something that's permanent. I don't want to invest in a $25 million condo and find out the bus route now has changed from this street to the next street. I want permanence of that system. So, the building community was very clear to us saying, if you want us to develop, and we will, because there is a need, you have to give us something that's reliable and permanent. And unfortunately, a rubber tire system can never compete with light rail, and we have actually tangible examples of that. Your question was, how did we then get people to accept? Once we got people buy-in from the public that rapid transit is needed, then it was pretty easy to show apples to apples. We showed that if we went with a bus system on a daily basis or on a monthly basis, this is the impact you will have on a tax rate. And then we did the same thing with light rail, and we did it with multiple options to show that ultimately you're looking at maybe $2 to $4 a month. Is it really worth us spending $4 less a month and get a system that's going to require now another improvement in 20 years? All of this information, if you do need it, is on our webpage. One thing we have done on this project that's very unique is since its start, every document has been transparent to the public. In fact, we shared all our financials, all the project agreements, everything on the web. If someone ever wants to read it, they can actually go on regionalwaterloo.ca webpage and see it. But you'll see the boards there that show all the options, and we try to show it in layman's terms that what does this mean? What does 1.2% every year mean for me? And we broke it down into dollars that, a year it's so many dollars, in a month it's so many dollars, on a day it's so many dollars. And the gap between BRT and LRT was so small that it made sense for us to jump from BRT to LRT as our ultimate technology.
On va mettre un terme à la période de questions de 5 minutes parce qu'on a dépassé un peu, puis malheureusement, je dois faire le gardien du temps. Ce qu'on va faire, c'est qu'on va passer à la période où vous allez pouvoir poser des questions à l'ensemble de nos 3 conférenciers. Merci, Darshpreet. Merci beaucoup.